Hey, welcome to Everyday Jesus. My name is Derek. Thank you so much for joining me. You know, one of the things that we've been talking about that Jesus calls us to is a deep, committed love for others, especially our enemies and our neighbors and all those around us. At the same time, he clearly knows that we're not always going to do that well. Sometimes we're actually going to do it pretty poorly. Sometimes we're going to see conflict. We're going to have disagreement. We're going to feel angry sometimes and have really sharp and hard situations and conversations and conflicts. Jesus knows that. And so this is another one of those times where it's important not to get too discouraged when it's difficult to have good relationships. When I find that it's difficult to love someone well, Jesus clearly knows that loving one another is hard, and he calls us to it. He calls us to a higher level than what we would naturally think in terms of how we love one another. But he also extends us a lot of mercy and tells us how to handle that. In fact, today my wife and I were having an argument, just stupid things, but you know, deep, real, important things about the ways that we interact with each other, and you know, both of us just weren't being loving in that conversation. And I know I was really reacting in some anger and just a lot of stuff, right? But Jesus reminds us, he tells us many times in the scriptures that our relationship with God is intimately connected, is inseparably connected to our relationship with others. And so we have to know that it's really important when we fall, when we falter, when we experience a rupture in a relationship, that we repair it, especially in a relationship like a marriage or a friendship or other close people. Sometimes it's not going to be possible to repair. Sometimes the other person is just done, and they go on and do what they do. But Jesus calls us for as much as we can, to repair relationships. He tells us, you know, at one point, if you're at the temple giving your sacrifice, giving your offering to the Lord, if you remember that your brother has something against you, not you have something against your brother, if your brother has something against you, first go and be reconciled with him, and then come and offer your sacrifice. He also says, you know, if you're on your way to court, if someone's taking you to court, reconcile, make peace with your accuser before you get to court. So what you see Jesus calling us to here is a humility, right? The humility to see that sometimes I wrong other people. Sometimes I am in the wrong, and I've hurt my wife, my neighbor, my friends. Sometimes I have to have the clarity and the understanding to see when I've done that and go and ask forgiveness. And this is hard, but it does take humility that Jesus models. It does take humility that Jesus calls us to, challenges us to. What he doesn't want, he doesn't expect perfect relationships all the time. But what he does challenge us to is when there's rupture, to seek repair. That, more than anything, is what will mark a follower of Jesus. That when there is rupture, it doesn't stay ruptured. But when there's a break in a relationship, there's a repair. So today, you know, my wife and I had, like I said, there was a deep, I mean, not deep, but a rupture in our relationship, in our peace, right? And so both of us, we have to seek humility in those situations. It doesn't say that we can always resolve a conflict. Sometimes we can't resolve a conflict. Sometimes all we can say is, I'm sorry, I've been wrong here. Please forgive me. There may be times where we just can't understand one another. There are going to be times in your relationships where you just can't find a solution. Jesus doesn't always expect solutions, but even when we're at an impasse, what he does command us to is to find peace and to be reconciled to one another. So maybe there are situations or relationships right now that are at an impasse, that are ruptured and need repair for you. If you're seeking the Lord, if you're seeking to follow him, he tells you, first go seek reconciliation there and then come to me. Over and over, our relationships with one another are tied to our relationship with God. We cannot be right with God, have an open, free relationship with the Lord if we're at enmity with one another. We cannot. The book of James, the writer says, if someone says he loves God but he hates his brother, he's a liar. We have to be at peace with one another. As much as it is up to us. Sometimes you can only do so much, right? Sometimes you're going to have a rupture with someone that they choose to keep it. They choose to remain in it and leave, or hold on to bitterness or anger. We can't control other people, right? But we can control how we respond, whether or not we go in humility and ask for forgiveness, even if there's not a resolution, even before there's a resolution. So are you seeking repair today in relationships that are broken, that are hurting, that are struggling? Seek forgiveness. Ask forgiveness in those times. Even if you aren't the only one in the wrong. Most of the time, it's two of us, right? It takes two to tango, we say. But even then, ask for forgiveness. Admit guilt. This is what it means to forgive. This is what it means that Jesus forgives us. He never says, what you've done is okay. You've not done anything wrong. Therefore, I forgive you. What he does say is, yes, I see you're wrong, and I no longer hold it against you. That's what we're asking. That's what he calls us to. He says, forgive as you have been forgiven. If you follow Jesus today and you've been forgiven, you have to learn to forgive. At one point, Jesus tells a story about two servants. One servant was forgiven a huge debt. He was in debt to this Lord, and he could not pay it back. And he was going to be thrown in prison, but he pleaded with him. He begged him, please forgive me. And the master had pity on him. He had compassion. And he forgave his debt, huge debt, just forgave it. That cost the master something. It cost him everything he had given, but he forgave it. Then another servant comes along that servant who had been forgiven runs into another guy that owed him some money. And he said, give me what you owe me. It was a pittance. It was nothing. $20. He said, give me what you owe me. And the guy said, I'm sorry, I can't repay you. And said he began to throttle him and just demand his money back. And some other servants of the master that had forgiven the large debt saw it and said, hey, this is the guy that was just forgiven like $1 million. And he's beating his friend for not giving him back $20. And when the master heard about it, he went and grabbed that servant and he threw him in jail. He said, and Jesus says, he uses this parable to say that if you can't forgive as you have been forgiven, then you will not be forgiven. That's a weighty word from Jesus. But I believe he deeply wants us to forgive. And if we can't, then neither will we be forgiven of our sins and the debt that we owe. So I want you to think about that today. Are there areas where you are holding grudges against other people and not forgiving them? Practically speaking, that does a few things, right? It maintains a barrier between you and the other person. If you can't fully forgive and release them from that debt, it keeps a barrier there if you're still in relationship with them. Or it breaks off the relationship entirely. Jesus wants good relationships for us. And forgiveness sometimes is how we get it. And you also know that harboring bitterness and anger and unforgiveness just eats at your soul. And there's the saying that harboring bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? It only hurts you. But it also keeps that relationship either broken or inhibited. It's not an arbitrary thing that the Lord calls us to. It's not arbitrary that, we just have to forgive because it's a religious thing. No. It is in some sense a practical thing for your good, for the good of others around you. So Jesus is serious about this. It's a deeply important thing that we learn to be people of forgiveness. If we're going to follow Jesus, this is foundational. There are going to be people that wrong you. There are going to be people that you're at an impasse with, that the only way to get through is to ask for forgiveness, and in so doing, forgive them as well. There are going to be times where you have that. If you're married, you might have that very frequently. So seek forgiveness today. Think about any relationships that you have that you might need to ask for forgiveness. It might be a long time feud or fight or frustration with somebody that you know. It might be a long-running family argument or feud. Whatever it is, who has something against you today? That even if you have something against them as well, even if it's mutual, where can you say, hey, I forgive you, will you forgive me? Because our relationship is more important than the thing, whatever it was we were fighting about. Where's there a fresh conflict today? Someone that you're angry with that has wronged you and that believes you have wronged them. How can you forgive them today? If you can't, ask Jesus to help you forgive them, and He will. This is vitally important. Just like today with my wife, there are ways in which we don't understand each other, can't make sense of everything. But what we do know is that we have to forgive one another. And we have to ask for forgiveness. And in doing so, we can find peace. I bless you with that today. And I'll see you next time.